Many woodworkers have their shop in a 1 or 2 car garage. I consider myself fortunate to have a bit more space than that, so I have perhaps a little less need to move things around than most. Nonetheless, I keep changing my mind about where I want things to go, especially since I've been remodeling and reorganizing my shop. I've experimented with a number of different ways of making things movable. Probably the most common go-to method of making a machine movable is a mobile base. This is Rockler's all-terrain mobile base under my Minimax SC3 slider. I consider this a really good mobile base. Mobile bases are great when you need to move something frequently. One really nice thing about mobile bases is that they don't raise the machine up very much usually. This one only raises it an inch or so, maybe less. When I bought this old Powermatic bandsaw, it had a mobile base with it, and I just kept it so far anyway. It's one of those customizable mobile bases where you control the dimensions by making hardwood pieces to go in between the corners. This jointer and planer pair has mobile bases built in, sort of. Under each corner of the machine, there's a wheel, and those knobs there are used to lock the wheels when you don't want the machine to move. This sounded like a great idea until I tried it in practice, and the bottom line is none of the wheels swivel. This thing moves nicely in only one dimension. So I'm going to just go ahead and say that the built-in mobile bases on these two machines are better than nothing, but not a lot better. The mobile base I'm using for my Unisaw is this one. I made a whole video about it actually. It has these brackets here which can be used with workbench casters, but in practice I never actually do that because the other thing I did was I designed this to accommodate a small pallet jack, and that's been my preferred way of moving this machine whenever I do need to. Here's the mini pallet jack that I use to move that Unisaw around. It's smaller than a regular pallet jack because the outside diameter of the forks is only 15 inches. And I do have a regular pallet jack as well. This one is a Harbor Freight model, although I didn't know that when I bought it. I got it used and I was unfamiliar with Harbor Freight's brands, and only later did I find out that this is a Harbor Freight pallet jack. I've come to understand that pallet jacks come in a variety of sizes and dimensions, so I'm not sure there is such a thing as a standard size pallet jack. Nonetheless, this size seems to be pretty common. The outside width of the forks is 27 inches. Because it's worked out so well to use that mini pallet jack to move my Unisaw around, I've extended the pattern to other machines. In fact, I think it's fair to say that I'm moving away from mobile bases as a pattern for mobility in my shop towards skids, custom built, designed to be used with a pallet jack. Here's an example of one of those skids I made for my radial arm saw. This is just a very simple design. It's nowhere near as nice as the one I made for my Unisaw. I made this with 2x4s and a nail gun. But this is the basic pattern I'm using for all the skids I make, and in practice, as a way of moving machines around, this has just been really effective, so I keep doing the same thing. I am certainly not an expert at material handling, but one thing I've learned is the difference between a pallet and a skid. This is a pallet, and the reason it's a pallet is because it has these boards on the floor. When a pallet jack is used with a pallet like this, the wheels of the pallet jack and the forks go in between these two boards, so the wheels have to go over this bottom piece. Whereas with a skid, the wheels of the pallet jack remain on the floor because this is not present. When using a pallet jack with a pallet, you have to make sure that when you try to lift the forks, the wheels of the pallet jack are between these boards, not sitting on one of these boards. You need the wheels to be on the floor.
because otherwise what's going to happen is that you're going to break the pallet as you try and lift it. For something to be compatible with a pallet jack, you need enough width for the forks to slide under and enough height for the forks to get underneath. But it's also important that there's not too much height, because a pallet jack can't lift anything very high. These skids work because there's just enough space for the forks to slide under, but not too much space, so that when I raise the pallet jack forks, it will actually lift the skid and the machine on top of it. As an exaggerated example, the forks will fit just fine under this blue cart, but there's way too much clearance, so the forks actually can't raise high enough to lift the cart, which of course isn't necessary because the cart's on its own casters anyway. Every skid I make uses 2x4s vertically on edge, doubled up, going from front to back. I think of those as the skis. And then I use also 2x4s for strength in the opposite direction to basically make kind of decking. And then I attach the machine to that decking using bolts or lag screws, whatever makes sense for the machine.
Here's another example, exactly the same design. This is my Walker Turner radial drill press. I find that in practice for my pallet jack, which as I said is 27 inches wide, by the time you add the 27 inches plus 3 inches on each side for the skis, effectively the minimum width of one of these skids is 36 inches or so. And then the depth is adjusted for whatever is necessary for the machine. By the way, this little arbor press that's hiding under there, I've told him multiple times he's going to have to move, but I think he likes it under there. Right next door here is a much larger example. This is a South Bend lathe. I'm wanting to get into metalworking a little bit, and so I picked this lathe up. I haven't decided yet where to put it, and in the meantime, I need to be able to move it around, so I built this skid. This is by far the heaviest machine that I've applied this technique to. It weighs about 1,500 pounds, but a skid like this has no problem at all dealing with that much weight. And in fact, the pallet jack says it can handle 2.5 tons. That's 5,000 pounds. So there's really nothing in my shop that would be too heavy for this design of skid and this pallet jack. I don't know if I will leave this lathe on the skid when I'm setting it up for use, because there are a couple of problems with this basic design. One is that it raises the height of the machine by, well, 3.5 plus 1.5, 5 inches higher than it would normally be. And then there's the fact that in some cases, depending on the nature of the machine, the skid is kind of in the way of your feet. This little arbor press is actually light enough that I can pick it up and move it around. It's kind of heavy, but I can pick it up. It's not like a 1,500 pound lathe. However, it had two problems. One is I needed it to be a bit higher. So in this case, the skid raising it up was a good thing. And in fact, I wanted to raise it even higher. So I doubled up the boards a little bit. The other thing is I wanted more weight for stability. So doubling up the boards gave me the space to put a couple of old tractor weights on the skid underneath the press itself. And then when I bolted it to the skid, it makes the whole thing a lot more stable. This is another example where I designed this for use with the mini pallet jack instead of the full-size one, because this press is only 21 inches wide. And so if I went to a 36-inch wide skid for use with the full-size pallet jack, this press would be taking up a lot of space for its size. As I've experimented with various ideas, I'm finding that there is no perfect solution. Every solution involves trade-offs. I'm liking the pallet jack skid approach that I've been using, but it's not perfect. Using a pallet jack to move a machine does mean that you need more space to be able to move the pallet jack around. I like the fact that these skids are cheap, even at today's lumber prices. A couple of 2x4s or a few doesn't really cost very much compared to a mobile base. I like the fact that one of these skids can handle an essentially unlimited amount of weight. Sometimes a mobile base with casters will have a bit less stability, which can matter depending on the kind of the machine, but these skids don't have any such issues at all. For certain machines, I might decide to make nicer skids, more along the lines of what I did for the Unisaw. But I also like the flexibility of not just limiting my financial investment in one of these skids, but also limiting my time investment. The simple 2x4s with a nail gun approach, I can put one of those together easily in an evening. And because I didn't spend much on it, either money or time, if I hate it, I can throw it away or take it apart and I haven't lost that much. This gives me the flexibility to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. As with most decisions I make about what goes in my shop and where I put it, I like to preserve the ability to change my mind.